Hello, everybody, and welcome to 2019. And this is the first section of the predictions that I'm going to be doing for 2019. First of all, I want to say thank you very much to all of my subscribers, both the new subscribers, the old subscribers. I've been watching that subscriber count going up, and it's very exciting. So I hope that you'll enjoy what I've got in store for you. And I hope I will just say to everybody that usually there's two ways that I do my predictions. And what I did when I put out a broadcast last year was I did global predictions 2018, 2019, and 2020. These are kind of still very, very relevant because they are all about the themes of the things that are going on in the world right now as caused by the planetary positions. What I'm going to talk about today is Jupiter in Sagittarius and how I think this will influence world events. It's also going to be some themes, some more specific things. And then what I've got planned next is a separate prediction for 8 different countries, including and then also Donald Trump and Bitcoin. So I'll be looking at all that to give us a better picture and some more specific details. Because I know some of you don't get as inspired by the themes, but you like the more specific things that you can nail it down to something that, is something quite tangible. Right, so what is happening, and right now actually, is quite unique. We have 4 planets in their home signs. So you've all heard the song, Football's Coming Home. Well, Jupiter is coming home because in Sagittarius, the sign it rules. Saturn is currently in Capricorn. Mars has just moved into Aries and is on the Aries point, which is quite powerful as we go into New Year. And we have Neptune, which is still in Pisces. So I worked out that is 0.0005% of likelihood to have 4 planets in their home signs, those particular signs. So I think that is going to create quite a powerful energy of things happening in this year. So I went back and I looked at previous years when Jupiter was in Sagittarius, and particularly when it was square Neptune, which only happened in 1936 in the most recent period. So Jupiter spends about a year in a sign. It moved into Sag in November, and it's going to be in Sagittarius most of this year. And the last time it was in Sagittarius was 2007. It was also in 1995, 1983, 1971. So I'm looking back at those years. So what do you expect to find? Well, when I thought about Jupiter in Sagittarius, I thought about things like aviation, weather, because Jupiter rules weather, and pioneering actions, exploration, politics, and the law. So those were kind of themes I was expecting to find in those years. But I found a few interesting and unexpected synergies between those years as well, and I think that'll enable us to sort of project forward. So let's look at 1936, when Jupiter was in Sagittarius and it was square Neptune in Pisces. In Virgo. This year it's going to be square Neptune in Pisces. Now the first thing that jumped out at me about 1936, and it links to a prediction that I've made for the UK, was that King George died and Edward VII succeeded. Now, as you know, if you watch Global Predictions 2018, 2019, 2020, I said that Prince Charles will soon become King Charles. This could be the year it happens. We've got Uranus that's going to be ushering that in. We've got the configuration in Prince Charles's chart. And now looking at that with Jupiter, it rang a bell to me again. So maybe March or sometime to the end of this year. I think that's definitely going to be a development in the UK. The other big thing about 1936 and Uranus entering Taurus at that very same time in 1936 was Germany's reoccupation of the Rhineland. And I see there a synergy to this whole EU army, the rearming of Germany, sort of Germany via Europe, trying to be a force in terms of the military again. And that is definitely something I've talked a lot about if you've watched all my vlogs on Brexit, is this theme of EU military unification. And I see a very powerful leader coming to light in Europe, probably a German or a Frenchman, more likely a man than a woman. And this is going to be a very powerful leader who in the short term might seem to unite people and might actually seem to kind of encompass some of these nationalistic feelings, but I think it could all be a wolf in sheep's clothing thing where this guy is a globalist in disguise. So we'll be looking out for someone to emerge this year and going into next that is going to fulfill that category. Another thing that interests me is, as I was looking through all these placements of Jupiter, was weather. And the thing that shows up time and time again is heat and flooding. Now, in 1936, Pittsburgh in America had its worst flooding in history. And that is a theme that's gone right throughout this, is weather. So I'm expecting a lot of extreme weather, particularly to do with heat and flooding, and particularly in America, some countries like Hungary and Czechoslovakia in Europe, and also in Australia. And I think there could also be some severe tornadoes in America, because that was something that was showing up quite a lot. Now, one of the themes that we're going to talk about that came up with Jupiter and Sag is the law thing, the legal thing, themes of legal events happening. In 1936 was the Lindenberg kidnapping and murder trial. There were also the deadliest tornadoes ever that hit Tulip, Mississippi, and the fifth deadliest that hit Georgia. So there you see this thing of powerful weather events. Now, I know because of this whole climate change thing, the news media tend to highlight every weather event. So every year, their records struck. But I think this year there could be some really significant records struck in terms of those things that I've mentioned. Another thing that came up a lot when I was looking through Jupiter and Sag is technology. And in 1936, it was when Alan Turing invented his machine, the Turing machine. There was also another mega heat wave in North America in that year. So again, showing that we're looking out for major weather. And yes, the rearming of Germany talk. Also, the year 1936, general strike in France. And we've seen that with the yellow vests, this upsurging of, the public wanting to strike back, use the power that they have to protest in France. The French are really good at using that power. So I think that will be a theme running further. As I've talked about in my prediction for France, I think Macron will cling to power. He'll hold on. Saturn on the 10th house shows that there's a increase of authoritarianism, so he really is hanging on in there. But again, we see synergies to 1936 and to an upswelling of discontent within the French people. Again, a major heat wave in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Indiana setting records. So again, I see maybe that area of America, perhaps the North Midwest, having a lot of heat waves. The Spanish Civil War began, and I also saw that things are going to start welling up in Spain. Not only is the Vox party, which is a more Eurosceptic or right-wing party, gathering momentum all of a sudden now that Spain is suffering the burden of the migrant crisis, which I also see increasing a lot again this year. It's going to become a big thing. Not that it ever really went away, but it's definitely going to be right back on the agenda. And so is the push for Spanish Catalonian independence. That's going to come back on. The Spanish people are getting quite restless about that. I think it's a way of showing discontent for the EU. Let's do separatist movements. What other movements can we do? Anything to shake this whole thing up. And one of the things that came up a lot to do with Jupiter and Sagittarius is events surrounding women. And in 1936, it was the last public execution in the US of a woman. Her name was Rainey Bertha. The other important thing about 1936 is the Moscow show trials began. This was a time when, the whole Stalin, show me the person, I'll show you the crime. He began a purge of the political elite, trying to get rid of his political enemies. And I think we actually see a lot of that going on in America right now. Though I don't actually see much difference between the Mueller probe and what's going on with the Stalin trials in Moscow back then. It's quite similar. It's not about evidence. It's about show me the man, I'll find you a crime. Look for the enemies we've got. Find anything. Dig until you find the smallest thing, or question them over and over again until they make a process crime, and we'll get them on that. So that's definitely going to be a theme carrying on in America, but I guess everyone kind of expected that. Beryl Markman became the first woman to make an east-to-west transatlantic flight, yes. And there was also kind of a national revolution in Portugal. So right throughout with Jupiter and Sagittarius, I see this theme of people revolting and challenging the politicians. There's a kind of resurgence of people's desire for freedom, for liberty, and expressing that. Hi, Bosnia 1000. Happy New Year. Hi. What about the Nigeria election, and will Nigeria break up? Okay, I'm sorry to say, when I do my predictions just now, there are a couple of countries I missed out, Nigeria, and I didn't do Jamaica yet, or Russia or India. I didn't have those included. But Chica, bearing in mind the whole desire for freedom and the desire for self-determination within countries, I think it's quite likely, because I talked about, when I did my global predictions for 2018, 2019, 2020, I talked about new countries emerging, and that would include countries breaking up. I talked about Kurdistan perhaps becoming a new country and Syria breaking up within these 3 years. So Nigeria, I'd say that it's a definite possibility given the whole kind of system that we're into at the moment. Julia, Happy New Year. Thank you for the things. My hair looks, thank you. My mom will be glad to hear that, because you were saying it's not right yet. It's not right. Thanks, guys. Okay, so now yes, Stalin's Great Purge. Yeah, similar to politics in America right now, the Great Purge, and also similar to even politics in the UK, where they're going after people like Aaron Banks. Anyone who was on the Brexit side is suddenly being scrutinized, as if everyone on the Remain side was suddenly, as whiter than white. I'm sure they weren't. I'm sure there was kind of dodgy things going on either side, but we only kind of see it on the Brexit side or on the side that's perceived as right wing. They go heavy on them, so it's very similar. Poland, Lisa. Yeah, well, Poland is going to continue its very good trajectory, which is taking control back and rising up in the nationalism. That'll definitely be continuing there. Hi, BH365. Happy New Year to you too. Happy New Year to everyone on there. I was a bit concerned that I wouldn't have well, not very concerned because this goes out obviously on repeat, but my computer was being dodgy earlier and I couldn't go into my live when I wanted to. Had to restart the thing a few times. You know how it is. So I was saying about Jupiter in Sag and aviation. So I look back to see in all those years I mentioned if there were significant events to do with aviation. And indeed there were, like in 1983, Korean Air Flight 007 was shot down by the USSR. Gulf Air 771 crashed. There was a bomb in the luggage. Columbia Flight 11 crashes. In 71, there was a Romanian Air. In 1959, the Boeing 707 began its service. In 95, there was a flight from Bucharest to Brussels, which crashed. And in 2007, there was an Israeli, that was when the Israeli Air Force attacked a supposed Syrian nuclear reactor, which I would say combines some of the aviation themes. However, looking at other years, there tends to be quite a lot happening in terms of aviation, air crashes and what every year. And I don't think some of those things I read there are like the biggest deal in aviation. So we can kind of, I'd say, rule that one out. It didn't work out quite as I expected. However, when it comes to court trials and legal affairs, I definitely had a hit. So, for example, in 1983, that was when Klaus Barbie was arrested in Bolivia. You will remember, he was a Nazi war criminal. In 1971 was the Charles Manson trial, which was huge. Of course, everyone talks about that when the others, him, were sentenced to death. In 2007, two major sort of legal events. For example, the Amanda Knox, that was when she and Raffaello Sollecito were arrested, and it was also the year of Madeleine McCann, which, although that wasn't, I'd say that was kind of a legal event, because bearing in mind that all the case files are now on the internet and we have thousands of kind of armchair detectives all over the world poring over it and putting their theories forward, it certainly was a kind of criminal stroke legal event that captured the attention of the whole world. So that's really relevant. Plus 1995, O.J. Simpson. Need I say more? It was also in 1995 that the Bosnian Serb leaders were charged with genocide. It was the time of the Oklahoma City bombing and the resulting trial. It was also the trial of Giulio Andreotti, an Italian prime minister, for his mafia ties. So I think there's a very strong hint there that this year is going to be big for legal affairs in the world, trials that grip us. Two things I'm thinking here is Donald Trump and impeachment, and the possible impeachment of Don Jr. I think Don Jr. being impeached is more likely than Donald Trump being impeached, but I do think they'll push it all the way. I actually, as you know, if you've watched my channel, I think that the whole Russian hacking thing is the biggest canard in history, and I am flabbergasted that so many people take it seriously when it's obviously an utter nonsense, bearing in mind the entire world's media, every celebrity, every banker, all of Wall Street, the big tech firms, all the big social media firms, governments all around the world, they all supported Hillary, and she still lost. And yet they're going to harp on the fact that a couple of hundred Russian bots swung that whole thing. I tell you, if that isn't kind of going against the tide, then nothing is. I also think we're going to see some events with Julian Assange this year. Could be positive mixed with negative, but there will be movement in that situation. Could be the changes in government in Ecuador mean that he can no longer stay where he is, and he's moved into maybe some sort of house arrest in the UK pending extradition, which could be the legal wrangling between here and UK, could be the kind of court legal proceedings that I'm seeing. Hi, Eudora. Happy New Year. Yes, catch up, Dora, sure. And Nick, hi. Which month's on safe for flying then? I'd say most of this year is okay, because I've kind of ruled out aviation as being a terrible problem, because there's actually less problems with aviation in a year when Jupiter is in Sagittarius than in other years. So while there are accidents every year and events every year, I'd say that this year is probably a slightly better year than average. Now, the big thing that I found out maps in exactly with what Donald Trump is talking about in his Space Force and wanting to invigorate America's space program is the years when Jupiter was in Sag were absolutely fantastic for events to do with space. For example, in 1983 was when Ronald Reagan started the whole Star Wars thing. Challenger had its maiden voyage in 83. Pioneer passes Neptune. That's the first man-made object that had ever made it that far out, because after Neptune, there's only Pluto, and you are bang out of our solar system. So that was quite big. And do you know that in 1983, Ronald Reagan announced GPS? So that was the start of GPS, which is now such a like a thing we take for granted in our life and is used, in every possible way. Okay, in 1971, of course, Jupiter's in Sag. We had the Apollo 14, the third lunar mission. Mars probe was sent up by the USSR. Apollo 15 was busy. Mariner 9 to Mars enters Mars's orbit, which was the very first time. So maybe this is going to be the year, I don't know, we go to the moon, send man to moon again, or maybe start the Man to Mars project. Something big is going to happen to do with space exploration this year. And in 1959, which is also a Jupiter in Sag year, we had the USSR sent their Luna 1 spacecraft out into space. It was the first weather satellite that was launched. The Pioneer was the first craft to escape the Earth's gravity, and it was the first time they put monkeys up in space to test the effects on the anatomy of the monkey. That was like 1959. In 95, Valery Polyakov spent a record number of days up in space I suppose it was on the Mir space station. Also in 1959 was the first pictures of Earth from space and the first pictures of the far side of the moon. So you can see there's quite a lot of exciting space events linked to those years. Now the next thing, which I wasn't expecting to find when I looked at Jupiter in Sag, but it's kind of along the theme because of the theme of communication, which is so like part of Sagittarius, was the internet. So in 1983, which was when Lotus 123 was released, and very significantly in 1983, the ARPANET was changed to TCP/IP, which was the beginning of what today we know as internet, hashtag, and like the IP address. Also, IBM, the personal computer IBM, and also XT was released. In 1983, would you guess, the 3D printer was invented. I didn't think it went that far back. And I hear now they're talking of it this year going into something called 3D printed food. Now that sounds kind of disgusting to me. I mean, GM is beyond the pale as far as I'm concerned. I don't think I'll be biting into some kind of manufactured food that comes out of a 3D printer. Sounds like a recipe for a health disaster. But I guess, they'll market it to us as something great, and there'll be people that really want to embrace it. So in 1959, again, one of these Jupiter in Sag years, we had Xerox, the first printer, was introduced to the public. Okay, let's go to 1995, which, as you know, was another one of these years. It was when Amazon was formed. Look at Amazon, Jeff Bezos, the richest man now in the world. I mean, he makes about 11 million a minute or something ridiculous. Also in 95, the internet became fully privatized. So it was really the beginning of the internet in terms of the way we use it now being publicly available, and also Windows 95, of course. And I'm expecting thus in this year coming that there will be some major event to do with the internet. Now, hopefully it'll be something that will decrease the amount of censorship and the stranglehold that all the tech monopolies have on the information on the internet. But unfortunately, it's probably getting more likely going to be something like taxes on the internet or more censorship in terms of, they have this thing that they're going to introduce on Twitter where you can't post links so easily because you'd have to pay a fee because it would be linked to plagiarism and intellectual property. So you wouldn't be able to retweet memes or retweet quotes and links quite as easily as we do now without having to pay a fee. So that could definitely shut down a lot of the way we exchange information. But hopefully there'll be some good news as well. Hi, Lobby Dossa. Hi, Chris. What was in the envelope at the HGW funeral? I don't know. I don't get that one. Let me ponder on that one. Are we going to encounter foreign aliens? Well, we might, but do you think they'll tell us about it? We'll be the last to know. They'll, at the top level, they'll probably all interact with these aliens, but they won't want to tell us about it. Can you imagine? Lisa, you're amazing, but what you are seeing with the Bush funeral, very important to think. Okay, I will. Oh, yeah, George Herbert Walker Bush. So what, there was something going on at the funeral that I missed. Where was I? I actually wasn't watching TV that day. I couldn't stand all this drooling. It was a little bit like when John McCain died and suddenly he was going to be beatified by the Pope kind of thing. He was the best thing ever. It's a little bit like Mad Dog. You know, when Trump recruited Mad Dog, it was going to be the end of the world. Now Mad Dog's retiring. It's also the end of the world. Oh, God. They can't keep their story straight, can they, in the media? So Jupiter in Sag tends to have effects for the UK. So we've talked about a possible world event, Prince Charles. That seems to me increasingly likely. Now, of course, bearing the Queen's age, a lot of people would say, well, big deal. But her mother lived to 100 and she appears to be in good health. So how that exactly comes about will be kind of interesting. So in terms of UK, Jupiter in Sag tends to be a good thing for the Tories. Like Thatcher won in a landslide in 83, which was totally unexpected. And in 95, John Major held on, which was also totally unexpected. So yeah, and then for 07, of course, Gordon Brown took over from Tony Blair. So that showed that there was a shift of leadership without an election. And I think this year there's going to be a shift in leadership without necessarily being an election, because I think Theresa May, look, I've been convinced she was going. That woman, talk about a bull terrier, she is still hanging in there. I see both kind of positives and negatives in that, but I don't want to get stuck on Brexit now, because I always save my Brexit chats for a separate one, because they tend to be kind of interesting and a little bit relaxed. You know, the other important thing about 07 was the UK finally paid off our debt. It was actually the end of 06, but Jupiter had already moved into Sagittarius. And I remember that was quite a big thing, because ever since 1945, we've been paying America back. So much for the special relationship, huh? They didn't give us a waiver on that debt. We had to pay it back right until the end of 06. So it was quite a big thing. Yes, so those are the kind of things that I see with the UK. The synergy to now is a change in leadership without necessarily an election, and a boom for the Tory party, which, I mean, I don't know if people are happy about that or not happy about that. I'm really more concerned about the state of Brexit. Jupiter in Sag was quite synonymous with assassinations and coups, although mainly in third world countries, not particularly. For example, rebellions in Ceylon, coup in Laos, Idi Amin, coup in Argentina, assassination in the Philippines, things like that. Joe Colombo shot dead in an Italian-American rally. So there's quite a lot to do with that. And I think that does play in the theme that I'm going to be talking about in my other predictions of increasing you know, the public want to take control and getting desperate to take control, to the extent that they will be looking to undertake coups or put on that sort of pressure. One thing, there were celebrity deaths. Jim Morrison, look, there's celebrity deaths every year. But the thing that struck me was it was the Buddy Holly Richard Valens plane crash in 1959, which kind of brought together celebrity and plane crashes. So I wonder if there is an aviation incident this year. One might be one involving a celebrity. Hi, musical. Hello. That's Article 13. EU wants Article 13, which is disaster. Well, everything they want is a disaster. They're really doubling down. They don't get the message. Hi, Sanjit, and Happy New Year to you too. Hi, Julia. Hi, guys. So let's have a little chat. I talked about extreme weather. That's one of the things that I'm definitely thinking. As we go into January, I see a lot of extreme weather in North America in terms of the cold, and extreme weather in Russia to do with the cold. But as we move to summer, it's going to swap. It's going to be the temperatures, and so mainly Australia and America affected. For example, in 1983, should I try and attempt this? It's a volcano in Hawaii. It's still erupting and flowing up until this day, and it's got a rather Kalawahi anyway, yes. 1971, in February, was a tornado, 2 earthquakes, a massive earthquake in Turkey that destroyed a whole town, Burdir. There was another earthquake which destroyed another big town in Turkey called Bignol. There was a cyclone in the Bay of Bengal which killed 10,000, and was the year Greenpeace was founded. I've gone only for weather events where an extraordinary number of people were actually unfortunately killed, or the devastation, because otherwise no point looking at other weather events where there wasn't some kind of dramatic statistic attached. Otherwise it wouldn't really be, you know, indicative of something unusual, would it? There was an earthquake in Japan which killed between 5,500 and 6.4 thousand people. There was a 7 Richter scale earthquake in Russia, and a terrible EU heat wave in 2007. And in 2007, there was massive flooding in the UK as well. As a year just rain and rain that summer. A lot of flooding, especially in the Midlands area. And I think there could be flooding in the UK, this area, particularly the Nottingham area. And it was also an 8 magnitude quake in Peru. Didn't mention all the years there when that happens, but those were some of the kind of significant events that were going on. Now, the one thing that I didn't expect when I looked at Jupiter in Sag was that it it's synonymous with firsts for women. So, for example, in 1983, Reagan appointed Liz Dole as the Secretary of Transport. Sally Ride was the first woman in space. Okay, and Vanessa Williams was the first Black Miss America. In 1971 is when women got the vote in Switzerland. In 1959 was when they had a referendum in Switzerland where they decided not to give the woman the vote. But when it next came around Jupiter in 1971, that was when women did get the vote. And in 1951, women in Nepal got the vote. So can you believe it? In Switzerland, the same year they vote not to give the women the vote, women in Nepal, which would probably be seen as a far less sophisticated country than Switzerland, do get the vote. In 1995, Lisa Clayton did a 10-month solo around the world navigation of the Northern Hemisphere. In 2007, now here's the one a lot of people that watch my channel will not be celebrating, Nancy Pelosi became the first female Speaker of the House. So I guess it's kind of big for women, but not very exciting for those of us who are not big fans of the Nance. Okay, and in 1983, 100 women protested in Lahore against Zua al-Haq's law of evidence. They were very successful, these women, and they actually ended up getting that law repealed. So a great sort of time for women. So let's look forward to this year and think there's going to be something that a woman does for the very first time, something really extraordinary. Financially, now I know that I've been saying, I think every economic expert, both in the mainstream and also in the alternative media, have been expecting a financial meltdown. I remember back in 2012, it was talked about the euro debt crisis, blah, blah, blah. When will it explode? And this seems to be an enormous can that can be kicked down a very, very long road for a very, very long time because they've staved it off. But I think we're going to see some problems this year with Germany and France going into recession. With Brexit, there could be, obviously there's going to be a blip because it won't be that smooth. But let's look back and see. So for example, in 1971 was when America, they flooded the European currency market with dollars to threaten the Deutschmark, and many central banks stopped currency trading. Now, something similar there could be with Donald Trump doing something to affect the European markets, possibly with some sort of tariffs, because I do see the European markets being affected in terms of their manufacturing. So something could be going on there that's a little bit similar. 1995, of course, was when Nick Leeson collapsed Barings Bank. So will we see the collapse of a bank, possibly an Italian bank this year? And I think that is incredibly likely. It was also the Mexican peso crisis. So you can see there's a lot of themes here of currency crises and dealings, and they're usually manipulated, aren't they? They don't happen spontaneously. Of course, 07 was just before the 2008 crash, which is the one, of course, I don't think we've ever really recovered from. And while Jupiter was in Sagittarius, BNP Paribas withdrew from 3 hedge funds connected to the US subprime mortgages thing. And that was what started the whole ball rolling. And yeah, 1983 was Black Friday in Venezuela, which was a very big event, sort of, collapsed their economy. So as far as the EU, well, Jupiter in Sagittarius seems to be synonymous with the EU expanding. And I think this year, it's not like they're going to find a replacement for the UK anywhere too easily, are they? But they are going to look to expand. So, for example, in 1995, again, one of these years, Austria, Finland, and Sweden joined the EU. And it was when the Schengen zone came into effect. And it was also when they signed the Barcelona Declaration, which I know a lot of alternative media speak about, but that dates back to 1995. And that was to pave the way for Europe expanding right around the Mediterranean basin and sort of incorporating from Morocco and all those countries, Algeria, Libya, Egypt, and moving around the Gulf there. So possibly some more loosening of ties with those countries to start expanding, because the ambitions, they're not going to be held back, are they? In 2007, Bulgaria and Romania entered the EU, and 2007 was the time when they started off with the Lisbon Treaty. So as you can see, there's a lot to do with EU kind of expansion going on there. So what do we see? So that is the kind of themes and events that I think kind of epitomize Jupiter in Sagittarius. So again, something financial going on. We're going into the precursor for a major financial, I wouldn't say it's going to be a total meltdown, but it's definitely a shakedown, definitely something that's going to bring the stock markets down, put countries into recession, and cause a whole lot of economic restructuring. Aviation-wise, things look fairly okay, unless there's going to be some event involving a celebrity. Court trials, I think, will dominate this year, and that'll be the trials in America from the Mueller investigation, the impeachment, and possibly something to do with Julian Assange. I'm getting this feeling from Assad's chart that he is going to end up in The Hague at some point, but probably not next year. I think a deal is being done. under the table, and he'll be sacrificed for this deal. So he's going to be landing up there sometime, but maybe not right yet. So just a little message to you as I finish this is, if you haven't watched my global predictions that I did the beginning of 2018, they still apply, 2018, 2019, and 2020. Give those a watch. There's two versions. They're kind of different. I use different approaches with both of them, but they both still highly relevant, okay, for most countries around the world. I haven't made specific predictions. It's like themes of things going on. So that's great. And if you want to look at my blog on communism and also my one on Agenda 21, those also contain, I wouldn't say specific predictions, but definitely kind of themes that I see going on politically, stuff that's probably not spoken about, but needs to be, put some more meat on the bone, just give a little bit more context to things that are happening to make them make more sense on a global scale. So thanks for joining me. And I hope the sound wasn't breaking up today, because Chris, envelopes and shocked faces seems very screwy to me at that funeral. We really need to know. Can you look into it? You seem to be able to see through things. Well, I'll definitely come up with a theory about it. I'm going to. You've piqued my interest now. I'm going to see what's going on. Hi, Nick, is there anything in the cycles of these planets that could possibly change the course of what sounds like a scary time? I do see a lot of positives, but the crazy thing, I'm going to do a vlog on it, but a little teaser is, why I've taken so long to do Germany's chart, and I haven't just been right out there and done it, it required a lot of thought, because what I did see looking back, looking at Germany's chart, both charts, because Germany's got one for 1871 and the more recent one for the reunification, was so many factors that were present before World War II. And I just think we are going into quite a scary time in terms of that. They are rearming. They're pushing this whole EU military unification. They are pushing to go up against Russia at every opportunity. And it's only because Putin is really quite restrained. He's not the monster I think that they make him out to be, that we haven't had a problem therein. So I think there's some good times in terms of the fight back against globalism. I think we can safely say that with Brexit and Donald Trump in, he's done an enormous amount in these 2 years in terms of new trade deals, withdrawing from the Paris Accord, withdrawing from TTIP. He's shaken everything up so much. I think he's done a wonderful thing to stall this whole globalization. And if he can stay in a little bit longer, it could almost be irreparable. That's why I think in this year they are going to go hammer and tongs at him to do everything they can that he doesn't get another 4 years, because he's bang on course for another 4 years. And I've said often, I think he'll get it. But, imagine the damage he can do, especially if he gets to appoint more judges. And he's really that, and he's also emboldened people all over the world to do that. And I think what's really important now is people are getting over labels. They tried to label people who voted Brexit as racist, as xenophobic. Same with everyone voted for Trump. You're not allowed to have a different opinion other than neoliberal globalism and centrism. As soon as you move away from that, you're somehow beyond the pale. You either, they demonize Corbyn on that side, they demonize everyone else on the right as far-right extremists. And I think people have stopped worrying about those labels now. And the mainstream media are becoming less and less effectual. And yes, they have clamped down and they have done tons of censorship. But the message is out there now, and you can't take that back. This whole fake news has been the word that actually took off. And it was in France, they were chanting when they were doing the Yellow Vest protests again yesterday, fake news, fake news. It's got on everyone's mind now. The trust in mainstream media is rock bottom. Their ability to influence us is rock bottom. They can take away our sources. They can throw people off there. They can shut down websites. We are still going to hunt that information, and we will still find it. Okay, thanks, Julia. Yeah, okay, I'm not sure if I'll get to do that now, but if I do get to do my other world predictions, you'll find that quite specific in some places. We'll see how we go. Yeah, interesting, definitely an interesting year ahead with lots of energy, but to keep on, there's some positives as well. Definitely, always positives. Come on. Yeah, because Brexit is going to happen as well, and that's going to be a boost. The Italians are doing well. Visegrad countries are doing well. Yeah, I think there's plenty to be positive about. More on this channel about that.